Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are stepping into a time machine and heading all the way back to 1989, a year that gave us some truly unforgettable cartoons, but also some that were gone before anyone even noticed. We are counting down 10 short-lived cartoons from 1989 that you probably forgot even existed. Drop a comment down below and let me know which one of these you actually remember watching and which ones you think deserved a longer run. Let's get into it. Number 1, McGee and Me.
Don't you wish? I'm not gonna forget you, Squid. You either, Lewis.
Hey, I'm your man. Thanks, Lewis. Forget it, man.
Kicking off our list at number 1 is a show that was about as wholesome as television gets, McGee and Me. Each episode of this half-hour show centered around a boy named Nick, his animated cartoon friend McGee, and the moral lessons the two of them discovered together as Nick settled into life in a brand new town. The show tackled real topics that kids actually dealt with, things like honesty, standing up to bullies, and having faith. It was one of those rare shows that tried to teach something meaningful rather than just fill time on a Saturday morning. McGee and Me officially released on June 4th, 1989 as part of the ABC Weekend Specials. However, most people who remember this show did not discover it on television at all. The majority of viewers encountered it on VHS, borrowed from a local library, screened in a church group, or played in a private school classroom. And if you ask people about their memories of this show, a lot of them will tell you that certain episodes genuinely traumatized them as children. The show had two very different sides to it. The live-action segments featuring Nick and the real world around him were pretty rough. The acting was not particularly convincing, and it showed. But the animated segments where McGee came to life were genuinely fun, colorful, and entertaining. Those animated moments had real energy and creativity that made the show worth watching despite its flaws. Only 9 episodes were produced for the original run of the series. Then in 1993, the show was brought back under the title The New Adventures of McGee and Me, which added 3 more episodes to the collection. It never became a mainstream hit, but for the audience it was made for, it left a lasting impression. Number 2, The Further Adventures of Superted.
You're too late. We've had intruders in the mine, and now the roof's collapsing, and there's still somebody down there.
Coming in at number 2 is a show that started across the ocean before making its way to American television. The Further Adventures of Superted. The original Superted was a Welsh animated series created by Mike Young. The premise was simple but charming. An ordinary teddy bear is brought to life and transformed into a superhero by a friendly alien named Spotty. Whenever danger showed up, Superted would whisper his secret magic word and transform into a hero complete with a red suit, a cape, and rocket boots. Together, Superted and Spotty would travel across the world, and sometimes even into space, to help people in need and battle the forces of evil. The American version of the show, produced by Hanna-Barbera and released for syndication on January 1st, 1989, took that foundation and pushed it into bigger, more epic territory. The classic villains Texas Pete, Bulk, and Skeleton were all brought back, but new villains were also added into the mix to raise the stakes. The theme song was completely replaced with a more American-sounding overture, and the show leaned into poking fun at American culture. Everything from the Grand Ole Opry to Star Wars was fair game. One of the biggest points of controversy for fans of the original series was the voice cast. In the American version, Superted was voiced by Danny Cooksey, who would go on to play Budnick in the beloved Nickelodeon show Salute Your Shorts. Fans of the Welsh original felt that the voice change was completely unnecessary and that Superted ended up sounding too much like a little kid, rather than the heroic bear they had grown up with. The series ran for just 13 episodes before it was canceled. For fans of the original, it was a divisive adaptation. For American kids discovering the character for the first time, it was a fun, if short-lived, adventure. Number 3, The Legend of Zelda.
Hey, I'm ticklish! Hey, you want a dance? Just ask.
At number 3, we have a cartoon that hits hard on the nostalgia meter for a lot of people, The Legend of Zelda. Loosely based on the massively popular Nintendo Entertainment System game of the same name, The cartoon brought the kingdom of Hyrule to life in animated form. The story followed Link and Princess Zelda as they worked together to protect the Triforce of Wisdom from the clutches of the evil Ganon. One of the most interesting things about this cartoon compared to the game was what they did with Princess Zelda. In the original game, Zelda spends most of her time as a captive waiting to be rescued. In the cartoon, she is anything but a passive character. She fights alongside Link, holds her own in battle, and is genuinely capable. It was a refreshing change that gave the show its own identity, separate from the source material. The show also had a running gag that became one of its most remembered elements: the ongoing love-hate dynamic between Link and Zelda. Link constantly tried to get a kiss from Zelda, and Zelda consistently wanted nothing to do with it. It was charming and funny in a way that kept younger viewers entertained even when the plots were not particularly deep. And that was one of the criticisms. The dialogue was fairly bland, and the stories had a tendency to repeat themselves without much variation from episode to episode. But what the show got right, it got really right. The music, the sound effects, and the overall visual design all felt authentically connected to the game. It genuinely felt like the NES adventure had come to life on screen. The cartoon aired as part of the Super Mario Bros. Super Show. While Monday through Thursday featured Mario Bros. Episodes, Friday was reserved for The Legend of Zelda, making it a weekly event for fans. The series ran for just 13 episodes total, and when the Super Mario Bros. Super Show was canceled, Zelda disappeared along with it. In 2005, the complete series was released on DVD, including all 13 episodes, along with interactive games and a drawing tutorial. Number 4, The Karate Kid.
No, it is mine.
Kara, power dangerous, not yours.
Kala does not need power. Kala can survive without it.
Coming in at number 4 is a cartoon that tried to ride the wave of one of the biggest movie franchises of the decade, The Karate Kid. Based directly on the beloved film series of the same name, the animated version brought back Daniel LaRusso and Mr. Miyagi. But this time, they were joined by a new character, an Okinawan girl named Taki. The setup was straightforward. A miniature shrine with mysterious magical powers had been taken from its resting place in Okinawa, and it was up to this trio to track it down and bring it back where it belonged. Every episode followed a very specific and very predictable formula. Mr. Miyagi would get a lead on where the shrine might be located. Daniel and Taki would follow up on that lead, and along the way, they would run into villains who had either already gotten their hands on the shrine or were actively trying to obtain it for their own evil purposes. Daniel and the group would engage those villains, defeat them, and come agonizingly close to finally recovering the shrine, only for it to slip out of their grasp at the last moment due to some random twist of fate. And just like that, the search would continue into the next episode. The cartoon was released just a few months after Karate Kid III had premiered in theaters, and the original plan was ambitious: a daily syndicated show with a full run of 65 episodes. However, the disappointing box office performance of Karate Kid III changed everything. NBC looked at those numbers and cut the episode order all the way down to just 13. The show struggled to connect with its audience for a few reasons. Fans of the movies felt that the cartoon strayed too far from what made the original film special. The formula became repetitive quickly, and the overall tone felt too light and too silly compared to the grounded, emotional storytelling of the live-action films. NBC pulled the plug after just one season, and the cartoon faded away quietly. Number 5, Ring Raiders.
Wrap them tight. It's the kid's first solo mission. Nervous, Cub?
No, sir. I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
At number 5, we have a show that was built around a very specific toy line, Ring Raiders. Based on the 1980s toy line produced by Matchbox and set in the futuristic year of 1998, the series centered on a group of elite fighter pilots called the Justice Crew, better known as the Ring Raiders. The team was led by Commander Victor Vector, and what set these pilots apart from ordinary aviators was their Ring Raider flight rings, special rings that granted each pilot unique supernatural abilities in the heat of battle. Standing in opposition to the Ring Raiders was the Skull Squadron, a crew of villainous pilots led by the menacing Scorch. The central conflict of the show was a combination of high-flying aerial combat and time travel, as both sides chased each other across different eras of history while fighting for control of the skies. The show had a catchy catchphrase, "The command is in my hand," and every single episode followed essentially the same beats. Scorch would cook up some evil scheme. The Ring Raiders would show up to stop him. There would be a series of aerial dogfights. Scorch would somehow escape at the last moment, and then the whole cycle would start again the following week. The stories were admittedly thin, and it was no secret that the show existed primarily to sell toys. The Ring Raiders toy line included 12 miniature planes, 6 for the Ring Raiders and 6 for the Skull Squadron, all designed to be worn on your finger like a ring so you could battle your friends. There were also 4 different base sets, battle blasters that strapped around your wrist and produced 3 different sound effects, and even a short-lived comic book series that ran for 6 issues. The show started out as a 2-hour movie special before being expanded into 5 additional episodes, but it could not compete with the established giants of the action figure world. G.I. Joe and Transformers were simply too dominant. Poor toy sales combined with weak ratings brought the series to an abrupt end. Number 6. Rude Dog and the Dweebs.
Hey, Dweebs, relax. Rude Dog is not known for letting down his buddies, huh?
But Rude Dog, the sign said no dweebs allowed.
Coming in at number 6 is one of the most aggressively 1980s cartoons ever put on television, Rude Dog and the Dweebs. The character of Rude Dog actually originated not in animation, but in fashion. He was the mascot of Sun Sportswear, a clothing brand that was right at the center of the late 80s surf and skate culture explosion. The brand was all neon colors, bold attitude, and West Coast energy, and the cartoon was designed to be a direct extension of that aesthetic. Produced by Marvel Productions, the show followed Rude Dog, a supremely cool canine who cruised around Beverly Hills in a pink Cadillac and ran a package delivery service. He lived in a garage with a group of 7 other dogs collectively known as the Dweebs. Together, they navigated their delivery duties while constantly trying to stay one step ahead of their enemies. A vicious cat named Seymour, a persistent dog catcher named Herman, and Herman's dim-witted Rottweiler assistant named Rot. Every week, the basic structure was the same. Rude Dog and the Dweebs would try to go about their business. Seymour, Herman, and Rot would show up to cause problems. Chaos would ensue, and somehow Rude Dog and company would come out on top. The series premiered on September 16th on CBS as part of their Saturday morning cartoon lineup and ran for 13 episodes before being canceled due to low ratings. The reviews were not kind. Critics pointed out that the show seemed to actively celebrate rudeness and bad behavior, which made it a difficult sell to parents. On top of that, the animation quality itself was pretty poor. It looked cheap even by the standards of Saturday morning cartoons in 1989. The clothing line that inspired it was far more memorable than the actual show ever managed to be. Number 7, Vytor The Starfire Champion.
And we'll search for 1,700 more if need be. But Master, you try my patience, Dreadlord.
Landing at number 7 is quite possibly the most obscure entry on this entire list. A show so rare that many people who were alive and watching cartoons in 1989 have absolutely no memory of it ever existing. The series followed a character named Vytor, a primitive tribesman who came into possession of an extraordinarily powerful object called the Starfire Ring. This ring was no ordinary piece of jewelry. It granted Vytor supernatural abilities that set him apart from everyone around him. Alongside Vytor was a brave and skilled female warrior who came from a technologically advanced futuristic city that floated high up in the sky. Together, the two of them had one mission: to stop an evil warlord who already possessed an orb of tremendous destructive power and needed only the Starfire Ring to complete his arsenal and conquer the entire world. The concept was genuinely interesting, and the execution was more ambitious than most cartoons of its era. What made this show particularly unique and particularly expensive was its use of early computer graphics blended together with traditional cell animation. This combination was incredibly rare for a television cartoon in 1989, and it gave the show a visual style that stood apart from everything else on the air at the time. However, that ambition came at a significant cost. The production expenses were extremely high, and unlike most cartoons of the era, there was no toy deal in place to help offset those costs. Without a merchandise partnership to generate additional revenue, the financial math simply did not work. Only 4 episodes were ever produced before the series disappeared entirely. Making things even more unusual, those 4 episodes were only broadcast in a small number of select markets across the country, which means that even viewers who were tuned into their local stations at the right time may have completely missed it. Despite its incredibly short run, the cartoon itself was actually quite good. The story was easy to follow, the animation was impressive for its time, and there was a genuine sense that with more support behind it, this show could have developed into something really special. In 2006, World Events Productions released all 4 episodes on a 2-disc DVD set, presenting them both as individual episodes and edited together into a single feature-length version, giving the show a small but meaningful second life for anyone curious enough to seek it out. Number 8, Dink the Little Dinosaur.
I wish we were tall enough to reach those leaves. Scabble your food.
At number 8, we have a show that managed to last longer than most on this list, but still never quite found its footing, Dink the Little Dinosaur. The series followed a young dinosaur named Dink and his 4 friends as they explored and lived within the volcanic landscape of a prehistoric world called Green Meadow. Unlike a lot of cartoons aimed at the same age group, Dink the Little Dinosaur was not built around action or conflict in the traditional sense. The show had a much gentler and more intentional purpose. It was specifically designed to help young children understand the world of friendship, what it means to be a good friend, and how to navigate the social challenges that come with growing up. The stories were carefully constructed to encourage positive values and behaviors in the children watching. Themes like caring for yourself and for others, showing tolerance toward those who are different from you, understanding and respecting the natural environment, working through problems creatively, and the importance of teamwork were woven into every episode. It was educational programming wrapped inside an entertaining animated adventure. The series premiered on September 16th on CBS as part of the Saturday morning cartoon lineup, the same day as several other shows on this list, which tells you just how competitive that particular Saturday morning was. Unlike many of its fellow 1989 debuts, Dink actually managed to run for 2 full seasons and produced 21 total episodes. The show even landed a partnership with McDonald's, which released 6 different Dink the Little Dinosaur toys as part of its Happy Meal promotions. But commercial partnerships and episode counts do not always tell the full story. Critics were not particularly generous with the show. The most common complaints were that it felt boring and overly generic, and many reviewers and viewers alike pointed out that it bore an uncomfortably strong resemblance to The Land Before Time, the beloved 1988 animated film that had come out just the year before. The comparison was not flattering. Where The Land Before Time had genuine emotional depth and memorable characters, Dink felt like it was following the same blueprint without bringing anything new or distinctive to the table. The series did eventually find a small second audience when it was rerun on the Boomerang channel in the early 2000s, introducing a new generation of young viewers to the world of Green Meadow. But even that extended exposure was not enough to elevate it beyond a footnote in the history of late 1980s Saturday morning animation. Number 9, Paddington Bear.
May I help you, sir?
You certainly may. I want to report an intruder at number 32 Windsor Gardens.
Door on your left.
Coming in at number 9 is a show that surprises a lot of people simply because they had no idea it existed. The Americanized version of Paddington Bear. Now, when most fans think of Paddington Bear, they think of the classic British animated series that captured the gentle warmth and quiet charm of Michael Bond's original stories. That version of Paddington, polite, well-meaning, perpetually getting into small disasters, always with a marmalade sandwich somewhere nearby, is the one that lives in the hearts of most people who grew up with the character. This was not that version. This Paddington Bear was produced by Hanna-Barbera as part of the Fantastic World of Hanna-Barbera programming block. The basic setup was familiar enough. A small, polite bear from Peru living with the Brown family in London, stumbling into gentle, well-meaning chaos, and somehow finding a way to make everything right by the end of each episode. The formula that had made the original series so beloved was kept largely intact. But Hanna-Barbera made one significant change that did not go over well with devoted fans of the character. They introduced a brand new character, an American cousin named David, and inserted him into the Brown family alongside the existing characters of Jonathan and Judy. It was a transparent attempt to give American audiences a more relatable entry point into the story, but for fans of the source material, it felt unnecessary and out of place. The addition of David changed the dynamic of the show in ways that many felt undermined what made Paddington special in the first place. The gentle, very specifically British sensibility that gave the original its unique personality was diluted, and the show ended up feeling like a pale imitation rather than a worthy continuation. The series ran for 13 episodes, and, interestingly, it was not canceled in the traditional sense. It simply reached the end of its planned run and stopped. By design rather than by failure, it was always meant to be a limited series. But whether it ended by choice or by cancellation, the result was the same. This version of Paddington quietly faded into obscurity, while the classic British interpretation continued to be the definitive one for fans around the world. Number 10, X-Men Pryde of the X-Men.
No, my dear, we mutants are not freaks.
I don't understand, and I'm afraid too.
At one point, we were all afraid, Kitty.
And finally, at number 10, we have the shortest-lived cartoon on this entire list, a show that consisted of not 10 episodes, not 5 episodes, not even 2 episodes, but just a single solitary pilot, X-Men Pryde of the X-Men. The story begins at a pivotal moment. A young teenage mutant named Kitty Pryde has just been welcomed into the ranks of the X-Men, still finding her footing and figuring out exactly where she fits within this extraordinary team of superpowered individuals. Almost immediately after her arrival, the X-Men are thrown headfirst into a crisis of catastrophic proportions. Magneto and his Brotherhood of Evil Mutants are executing a plan to crash a comet directly into Earth, threatening to wipe out all of humanity in a single devastating blow. With the fate of the entire planet hanging in the balance, the X-Men have no choice but to go to war. The pilot drew heavily from one of the most celebrated and iconic story arcs in the entire history of X-Men comics, Uncanny X-Men issues 129 through 139. For longtime readers of the comics, seeing those storylines translated into animation was genuinely exciting, even if the execution did not perfectly match the depth and complexity of the source material. The origin story of this pilot is fascinating in its own right. The funding that made it possible did not come from a dedicated X-Men production budget. It actually came from money that had originally been set aside to produce a 13th episode of RoboCop, the animated series. Marvel made the decision to redirect that budget away from RoboCop and toward this standalone X-Men introduction instead, a gamble that showed real belief in the potential of these characters in animated form. Unfortunately, the timing could not have been worse. Shortly after the pilot was completed and ready to move forward, Marvel ran into serious and widespread financial difficulties. Production on everything was halted, and any plans for turning this pilot into a full series were abandoned entirely. The pilot aired in syndication on September 16, 1989, as part of the Marvel Action Universe programming block, and was later made available on VHS for fans who wanted to revisit it. The reception was mixed. On one hand, it gave comic book fans their first real animated look at the X-Men and generated genuine excitement about the possibilities. On the other hand, critics noted that the tone of the pilot was noticeably campier and more lighthearted than the darker and more emotionally complex themes that define the comics. The gap between what the source material was and what the cartoon delivered was hard to ignore for serious fans of the books. But the story of this pilot did not end with its cancellation. In 1990, the video game company LJN released a game called The Uncanny X-Men for the Nintendo Entertainment System. The team lineup in that game was nearly identical to the one featured in the pilot, with only one change. Dazzler was swapped out in favor of Iceman. The game was unfortunately not the redemption the franchise needed. It was widely criticized upon release and has since earned a permanent place on lists of the worst superhero video games ever made. Despite all of that, the single-episode run, the financial collapse that killed its future, the mixed reviews, and the failed video game spin-off, Pryde of the X-Men holds a genuinely important place in the history of Marvel animation. It laid the essential groundwork, established the visual language, and proved that an animated X-Men series could exist. Just a few years later, in 1992, All of that groundwork paid off when X-Men, the animated series, premiered and became one of the most beloved superhero cartoons ever made. In many ways, none of that would have been possible without this one forgotten pilot from 1989. And that wraps up our countdown of 10 short-lived cartoons from 1989 that most people have completely forgotten about. From a single episode X-Men pilot to a Paddington Bear that nobody asked for, from a dinosaur that could not escape the shadow of the land before time to a ring-wearing fighter pilot who could not compete with G.I. Joe and Transformers. 1989 was a fascinating and chaotic year for animation. Some of these shows deserved better. Some of them deserved exactly what they got. But all of them are a part of the story of how Saturday morning cartoons shaped an entire generation of kids who grew up glued to their television sets every weekend. Drop a comment down below and let me know which one of these you actually remember watching. And if you think any of them deserved a longer run, I want to hear about it. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss another trip down memory lane. We have got plenty more coming your way. Thanks for watching.